All right, welcome everyone. This is Mike Cosgrove with Pro Concepts, PCIA, and you can reach us at 800-969-4041. Email address is pciaonline.com, and I've got a friend and colleague joining me today, Trevor Brooks with Lorix Real Estate. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Thanks for being with us. So, what I find about Trevor, and I didn't tell him this, but Trevor's like an onion, and the more I talk to him, the more layers there are, and the more impressed I am with him. So I knew I liked him the first time we shook hands, but and we've worked together for a while now. But the more I learn about him, the more I'm excited to have him join us on the podcast today. So thanks for being here. The podcast we're talking about today is the 5 keys to finding your next commercial space. So it's going to be on the real estate side. But I know between you and I, we've got all kinds of great stories that we've been sharing on different topics and this and that. But I like to always ask everyone, what's their favorite business book? Like, what's your all-time favorite business book, you'd say?
Yeah, I'm not as avid a reader as I would like to be.
Okay.
Just I think the phase of my life that I'm in. But one of the ones that does stand out to me is one of the simpler ones. And it was given to me back when I worked in the corporate world by a manager, by my superior. And Eat That Frog, right? Oh. Okay. Simple concept. We all love to procrastinate. Procrastination is easy. Like if you've got a to-do list with 10 things on it, the hardest one always tends to be the last one we want to do.
Oh, nice.
And then maybe we push it off to tomorrow, right? But
Sure.
it mentally weighs on our brain and then reduces our efficiency on everything else. Okay. Because we're thinking about it. We're thinking about not getting to it, and we don't want to make that phone call or fill out that report, whatever it is. So the entire principle is just take that. There's no good way to eat a frog.
Sure. Right.
Eating a frog is going to be terrible. So just do it. Right. And take that thing you're procrastinating, putting off the one, just get it out of the way because it's going to free up brain power to focus on everything else.
Okay.
It's going to be off your plate, off your mind. And I know that in my entrepreneurial spirit, and we're wearing so many different hats, and a lot of small business owners always are, there might be something that is not your forte. You might be a great salesman and you hate the HR aspect. Sure. You might hate to do payroll because it's the pain in the butt, but you got to do it. So concept is simple. Just take that task you don't want to do, but you have to do, and just get it done. Yeah, and put it behind you.
So I've not read this book, and I read a lot of books, but I don't believe I've read this book. Sometimes until I see the cover and see who the author is and all of this. And by the way, all of this will be linked on the notes of the podcast today, so you'll be able to find this book easily. But I wonder if when you say the frog, one thing that I do is, if I've got this task and it's daunting, like it's one of those things that wears on you, like you were saying, if I break it down into smaller tasks and say there's 10 items that go into it, and if I accomplish one and it took me 15 minutes, for some reason my mind releases it, and then I can get the other things done that have to get done, and then I can go back and continue to eat that frog, I guess is how the book, is that kind of what they talk about doing? Or do they just say take the most difficult and do it until it's done?
It's about getting through it. Now, if you got to break it into components to get through it, if that works for you, great. Sure. But so many of us just have a tendency to be like, I can just do that tomorrow instead of today.
Right.
It's about not doing that, because even though you might have got these other 9 things done today, this 10th item was in the back of your head the whole time, and you were less effective on those other 9.
Gotcha.
So tackle it, get it done, put it off your plate, and forget about it, and move on.
Nice. I've mentioned this on a previous podcast. I just finished it's the 12-week year, and it's all about breaking your year into 12-week increments and setting goals based on those 12 weeks. It's kind of like from an athletic standpoint, you have a training program you do for 12 weeks and then it switches up. Same kind of concept, but because when you've got 365 days, it's very easy to put it off to the next day. Whereas if you've only got 12 weeks to get something accomplished, it makes you have more, fire under yourself to get it done. So it sounds somewhat similar, but that would be a great book.
It sure does.
If you liked the one that you mentioned.
I haven't read yours, so maybe we'll read each other.
Yeah. There you go. So how about something of interest about Trevor Brooks?
I guess something that most people find interesting. I own a brewery.
It's pretty cool.
It has its perks.
Can we be friends?
It definitely has its perks. I do own a brewery behind the scenes, after work hours. I guess I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, although I kind of hate that word, and that's probably a different discussion to have.
Well, I realized before we started the recording on this tonight, we were sitting here talking about all kinds of different things, and I go, my gosh, we could do podcasts on all kinds of different things here, But anyways, go ahead.
Well, so I own this brewery. I'm a part owner, in all fairness. I own 25% of the brewery. We bought an existing operation in June of 2019.
Nice.
Spent the fall and winter rebranding, remarketing, adding a kitchen to add food service to it. We knew that was one thing we were lacking. And then in March, we literally turned our kitchen and food service on Saturday before St. Patrick's Day. So that would have made it Saturday, March 15th. Or March 14th, and then on Monday morning we got shut down. Back to the drawing board. Lost all my staff.
Sure.
It's been 2 years of a battle, but everybody out there right now in the small business industry has their war stories from the last coming up on 2 years. Really, it's impacted our lives.
Sure. So what's the name of the brewery?
Eternity Brewing. It's in Howell.
Okay.
Latson Road and Grand River. We are in a terrible strip mall. I know it. You don't got to tell me.
Location-wise, you don't like the location.
I hate the location physically. Okay. Now, the traffic pattern's fantastic.
Sure.
But I hate the physical location that we're in. It's hard to create an atmosphere when you walk up to a strip mall. I, generally speaking, don't love strip mall bars or restaurants.
Yeah,
right?
I got you.
But we bought an existing location, and it was about seeing that current lease through.
Absolutely.
What I love is inside. The product, the staff that we have. I was a customer there before, as were my 3 other partners, and we really loved the place. The previous owners were a husband and wife team, and they developed something that we thought was really worthwhile.
Sure. Great
beer, a great culture, a staff that loved each other and loved what they did, and have made friends there. It's a very Cheersy type concept, but people know each other from being there. So we were really inspired to take that on when they decided that they wanted to take a back seat to the operation. They were a young couple starting a family, decided owning a business wasn't necessarily for them.
Okay.
And so we tried to just pick up where they left off and keep running with it, right? And just keep reinforcing the culture, the atmosphere.
Sure.
Fantastic staff. We have fantastic beer, and that is not self-serving. I don't brew the beer. I have a brewer. I don't know anything about brewing beer. I know how to consume beer. But my staff is awesome, and we have big visions for the future of Eternity Brewing.
Well, I know you've got quite a following from what I understand. I mean, it's big.
Yeah. If it was like 20% bigger.
Well, it can always be bigger, right?
You hear me out there? Get over it.
So talking about staff, I did meet a young gal from your staff at a chamber event. Is it Chelsea?
Brittany,
gosh.
Yeah, Brittany.
Actually, I was at the Moose Lodge up in Fenton last night, and there was and that gal's name was Chelsea, is why I thought Chelsea. But Brittany is amazing.
She's pretty dynamic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So talking about staff, I mean, as soon as I met her, I was like, this gal is awesome.
There's a Maddie as well.
Okay.
Brittany and Maddie are really close friends.
A couple of duos.
Yeah, and on Wednesday nights, if you come to Eternity, that's our trivia night. We have them both on. And I think there's people now that come purely for the Brittany Maddie duo.
Oh, I got to make a note of this because I mean, after meeting Brittany, I got to come see Maddie.
I know, just bubbling over with personality, right? It just doesn't. That smile, I think she wakes up with that smile on her face.
Oh gosh, super. I mean, just amazing person. I mean, people gravitate to her the way she is.
Without question, they do. Yeah, without question.
That's cool. So I just did our last podcast was with the Dale Carnegie folks. And so we talk about, just putting a smile on your face, and Brittany's smile just like lights up a room. Mm-hmm. She's a good kid. So I say kid, but a good person. All right. So kind of getting down to business. So the five key ways to finding, or 5 keys to finding the next commercial space. What's the first one you want to start with?
Well, I thank you for having me here with this. This is something I'm really passionate about.
Sure.
Before I was in the real estate business,
okay,
I still own my own company. I owned the UPS store franchise in Howell.
Okay.
And I owned that for 18 years total. I have since sold it. But when I got into that business, right, this is where my passion comes from. When I got into that business, I was 23 years old.
Okay.
And very relatively new to business. I had some stuff before that, but nothing that official, right? I had a lease and I had a landlord.
Sure.
And I was young and I took it on, and it was a great investment opportunity, but I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, right? I signed a lease that wasn't necessarily as in my favor as it maybe could have been, right? There was things I didn't know.
Sure.
And you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And after I had been in that business about 10 years, I was just looking for something else to do, something to grow my personal career. And through mutual friends, I was introduced to my broker who owns Lorex.
Okay.
And he, after several meetings, convinced me I needed to go get my license and get into this business. He was like, you've got the personality for this. And so I really entered this business with the concept of I'm going to help other business professionals understand their options for
Sure.
where they locate their business, understand what rights they have, take the intimidation factor out of it. And that is really what brought me to it. So I've been practicing commercial real estate. Specifically, what we do at Lorex is commercial. Every now and then we do a house for somebody on a referral basis, of course, but
Sure.
our discipline is commercial, and that's where we like to be experts at it. And so, upon your invitation here, I put together sort of a list of some things where I see that I see come up over and over and over again.
Where you can give guidance.
Yeah, I can at least speak from it's not 100 years of expertise, but from 10 years of helping people in Livingston County.
Sure.
This is what I see a lot, and definitely the first thing that comes up more often than anything else is somebody wanting to own their own space.
Okay.
Right? Everybody wants to own their space because why would you rent? Like, I can build equity. I can own my own thing. Sure. So a lot of people get hung up on the idea of owning. And sure, we would all love to own
Sure.
and not be renting and building equity. But there's a lot of headaches that can go into owning.
Sure.
And I have seen more than a few times people be so singularly focused on the fact that they have to own a property, that they're only looking at for sale listings. And that's so much smaller of a pool. That they end up making the wrong choice or end up not doing anything at all.
Okay.
Because they're focused on it, right? So,
Sure.
so although I think the benefits of owning are pretty easy to understand. Mm-hmm. The physical property, the asset, building the equity in something. There's a downside to it to consider as well. And oftentimes, when in talking to people, they never think there's any downside to owning a commercial property. Right? Like, I see this all the time. They're like, well, but I own it. Yeah,
it's like a house on steroids,
And if you own the wrong thing, right? So the beautiful thing about the residential real estate market is that the market is very stabilized and extremely liquid.
Okay.
Sure, everything's got its ups and downs, right? But if, there's a big buying pool there and you either have 3 bedrooms or you have 4 bedrooms, and my need is either for 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms,
Sure.
right? In this rough geographic region.
Sure.
But the criteria for residential transactions is so much broader.
Right.
Okay, but on commercial, it just simply isn't that way. They have a tendency to be much more specific use. What do you need, and what does the next person need? So the market's somewhat smaller. I had one of my biggest clients tell me one time. He's an older gentleman. He's been a bit of a mentor. He's a big client of mine. Owns a couple of million square feet.
Sure.
But he started off his professional life as a real estate agent.
Oh.
And he's told me 2 things in my career that I will never forget. He said, it's easy to buy and it's hard to sell. Right? So when you are going to make the decision to own something, to pick up a piece of real estate in the commercial world, that doesn't sell in a week or a month or 6 months necessarily,
Sure.
right? The other thing he always told me is leverage is great on the way up and terrible on the way down. Right? So it's about that healthy balance.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of gets to my point. Like, if you are out there to own your property, you have to decide whether it really makes sense for you. There's considerations like, especially when you're a new business, unless you've got a full C corporation with some tangible assets, you're going to be signing personally.
Sure.
So that loan's going to show up on your personal credit report. It's going to count against your personal cash flow.
Sure.
And sure, you can use the income you're taking from your business, but take that into consideration.
Right.
In your personal life, do you need a new car? Do you need a new home? Are you looking for a vacation place? Because this business item that you want to own is going to be both an asset, but it's going to impact you on the cash flow side as well.
Gotcha.
So it's like not making too light of that. And then again, I would say the biggest thing is the specific use for your business.
Okay.
You need to have the right type of building for your operation. It's not about just owning a building.
Exactly.
And saying, there's this great warehouse space and it's cheap because it's a warehouse space, but I need professional office. Well, if I need to invest $50 a square foot to convert it to professional office,
Right.
am I ahead of the game?
You're looking at the wrong space.
If the rent rates are $15 a square foot,
Sure.
right? Like that doesn't make any sense to do. And then in the back of your head, also considering what's the exit strategy?
Right.
Can I get out of it?
Well, because to your point, real estate or residential real estate, you can get out of fairly easily.
Right. If you're priced right, relatively quickly.
Commercial could be a long haul before you can offload a building that you no longer want to own.
You can own a beautiful piece of commercial real estate and you can price it ridiculously cheap. But unless there's another user for it,
Sure.
it doesn't make any difference.
Right.
Because if I can't use it for what I need it for, it doesn't make any difference. And this is ever especially true with owner-operator, and that's really who I'm talking to right now, because it's the owner-operator that wants to own their space. Well, when they're done with it, so is their tenant.
Sure.
So it doesn't make any sense from an investment standpoint.
Right.
So there is a certain pool of commercial real estate investor that exists, and that provides some liquidity. But if you're an owner-user, when you're done, so is the tenant. So now you're going to have empty building.
Sure.
And can you find somebody to backfill it? And at what rate are they going to pay? All of these things make it very hard to use. And there's just no two like kinds of commercial property.
Sure.
It isn't the same as residential at all. Every one of them's got, their specific use, what they're good at. So it's very important to remember that. And I say when you're looking at it, you need to separate the two. If you're an owner user and you've got your business, you need to have two different hats on. The CEO of this company that's going to occupy the building, sure, and the landlord hat, and make two separate pros and cons lists.
Right.
Because owning that building might help the business from an asset to borrow against or whatnot, but it could also hinder the business as well as being. Sure. Am I buying this because it's available for sale, or is it truly the right building for my business to flourish?
Right.
Because I want to own, so I sacrifice some things I would like.
Sure.
Maybe maybe it's only got one loading dock and I really need two.
Sure.
Right? But that one loading dock means I can only offload one truck and load one up at a time.
Right.
Right. So you start to make those concessions because you think, well, it's close to what I need, and I can own it, and that's better than renting. But then what you do is you bottleneck the operation that's inside. And ultimately that operation that's inside is what's driving the decision at all.
I gotcha.
That's
a great point.
Without that operation inside being
Sure.
fruitful,
right,
you don't need the building at all.
Right. What's the golden goose?
Right.
The golden goose is the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So I think it's important to see it in two different lights and keep those pros and cons lists separate. And oftentimes I run into people that they're only looking at it one way, and they get so focused on the fact that owning is better than renting in all circumstances. And it's simply not. If you can own the right thing, fantastic.
Yeah.
If you can't, it's far better to rent.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. And then, so going on to number 2, we've got pricing is not the most important criteria. And it does seem in the world, and it doesn't matter what item you're talking about, if it's a vehicle or, whatever the case might be, pricing is a very important criteria. But it isn't the most important. And don't you think that setting the price to the side, I mean, obviously everybody's got budgets and all that kind of stuff, but what do you suggest here? Pricing is going to be important, but what kind of advice do you give people here?
Yes. So almost always the leading thing is the price. Somebody says, this is my budget. I need to be within this budget. And they begin their search on a budgetary standpoint.
Sure.
And pricing is obviously an important factor because overhead is important. We all have to have a P&L that we answer to.
Sure.
But if you are looking at everything through the idea of pricing, you're going to have a very, very narrow scope of what's out there. And so, does it make sense to spend a little more to have a better location for your retail business, to have better signage, to have better road frontage or better in and out? One strip mall is not the same as another strip mall.
Sure.
Even from the visual facade
sure.
of it, the beauty of it, the attractiveness from the road for your customer base. What's the tenant mix?
Sure.
In there, the cooperative tenant mix back and forth. So that's where I see a lot of times people always want to focus on the pricing, and it is an important component, of course, but it is not the only component. And you want to make sure you don't sell yourself short for the future as well.
Right. Only thing I was going to throw in there, I mean, you mentioned about location, and I think from a location standpoint, that's something you can't change. Once you're there, right? That's got to be number one. That takes a front seat to the price. The location's got to be number one. So if you've got two facilities, let's say you're looking at commercial spaces, and one is much more from a cosmetic standpoint, looks much better, presents much better, but it's a terrible location, you're better off taking the better location that's got the crummy inside and ultimately redoing it on your own time, down the road, that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. If your customers don't know where you're at or can't find you, it doesn't matter how much of a palace that you've got. Moving, like you said, like once you're there, you're there. That's
sure.
right. Moving is extremely expensive. So you need to plan for current needs And you also need to try to anticipate realistic future growth needs and balance all of it out when making the decision. So I like to start my criteria over my ideal situation. Let's look at the perfect properties.
Sure.
What's my perfect solution? Let's not be overly ambitious or overly in the bubble about future growth. Let's be realistic about everything. But let's start there and then see out of this list what fits in my budget.
Sure. Yeah.
And am I willing to go 10% more on my rent or 5% more because this property is probably going to serve me for the next 7 to 10 years as opposed to 3 to 5?
Sure.
Because then you have the cost on the road of moving if
Right.
it needs to happen. And once you commit to a space, you're very locked in, especially when you talk about retail or office. I can't tell you how many times I've toured properties and had clients say, this is great, and this one next to it's empty. So if I need to expand, I can. They could sign a lease tomorrow, right? Like you can't enter this. Your decision cannot be contingent on the fact that your neighbor is empty right now.
Sure. Right.
Right. Like somebody could be touring it in an hour. We have no guarantee.
Right.
So I think you need, when you're identifying space, you need to put price aside, identify the right space for your business, all of these things into consideration. Sure. And then after you have that list, say, okay, now what makes the fiscal sense? Yeah. And if you can't find any commonalities, then we need to start over and talk about what's really going on.
So something you said that totally resonates with me. So you talked about the planning phase. So planning on where your business is going in the next, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think before folks start looking at commercial real estate, when you said that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head that if they've not done that planning, and that planning could consist of meeting with their financial planner, their CPA, and kind of just kicking the can on where they see that business going and what their plans are. And then perhaps, does that make sense?
No, you're spot on. Most people skip all of that planning step. I see it all the time. And my young 23-year-old self that just wanted to have his own shop and do something, I'm very sympathetic. And I love to work with these clients. A lot of time I consider my job like almost counseling and business guidance, right?
Right. Welcome to the team.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like, okay, I'm 42 now. I've been at this a while. Listen to me. I had a people call me 3 months ago, and they said, we'd like to see a showing on this office space. It's right in Grand River, in downtown, it's close to downtown Brighton. I said, sure, I'd be glad to meet you there. And they had an agent representing them. Yeah. But the agent representing them was primarily a residential agent. Commercial was not really what they did. Okay. But they had these people they were working with. And I said, well, what type of use are they looking to do, just so I have a better understanding? And the answer I got was, I'm not really sure. And I thought, well, how are you representing them? In my opinion, you've not yet done your job.
Right.
So I show up to this showing, and again, it's professional office space. We're looking at 1,700 square feet that's got 6 offices in it. These people walk through the front door, very sweet. And they say, we'd like to open up a smoothie shop. Well, we have to tear everything inside here out, right? And I said, what made you think this space? Well, we saw it online and it fit our budget.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, well, our asking rate fits your budget, but you're talking about $40,000 in demolition, and now we need to add food service. So I need a drain line, I need this, I need that. And like this doesn't make any sense for you at all, right? Like it's about planning, but I think a lot of people get the vision for their business in their head, and then they like just start attacking it the wrong way. Yeah. So they were doing their space search because they wanted to, visualize where they wanted to see, which I can understand, visualing, helping, but it's sitting down and saying, what do we need? What's the practicality of this? What's the proper planning? And getting those things all in order. Those type of things happen all the time.
Sure. Well, and I would think in your space, when you have that type of a meeting and you help bring them back to reality, I would imagine you probably make clients and friends and relationships for life, because they're always going to remember that old guy at 42 years old giving them some advice that they're like, thank God we didn't do that, because another realtor very well may have just been happy to get them that space and not filled them in on all the reasons why it didn't make sense.
Yeah, you know what? I hope that's true. That's the way I look at it is very much from I'm not here to sell you anything or lease you anything. I want to help you.
Right.
It behooves me for you to be successful long term.
Exactly.
Not for me to get my commission check and have you fail in 6 months.
Right.
And that is the way that's what I wanted to do when I got in this business. That's the way I approach it. And I've met a lot of people, and I have I have one clients from that aspect, and I'd like to think I've located a few over the years to very successful opportunities.
Yeah, nice, awesome. All right, so we got 1 and 2 down. So how about number 3? We've got on here, space is just right is never enough, but neither is too much of a good thing.
Yes, this is definitely one that we struggle with a lot.
Sure.
People will say, I have a business. We have outgrown where we're at. We have 6 employees. We have 2 private offices. The rest of them are working at cubicles. So what I need is a space for 6 private offices.
Oh.
I say, well, are you done growing? Like, is that and if you are, great.
Sure.
But a lot of times people want to lease because rent is an expense, right?
Sure.
There's no return on it. So they want to rent exactly what they need right now.
Yeah.
Without proper consideration for future growth.
Sure.
And when I say too much of a good thing is, too much is never a good thing, right? Then I see the opposite of it. Well, I just recently worked with a new insurance agent, property and casualty guy.
Oh, okay.
Just got his license from one of the name brands.
I thought we were the only ones out there.
This guy was new to the insurance game.
Okay.
He had been an electrical salesman for like lighting and switches and stuff, right?
Okay.
But he had gotten his insurance license and he just got his nameplate in one of the big brands. Yeah. And, he came to the showing and was super energetic and really nice and enthusiastic. And that can be very contagious. Right?
Sure.
Like, yeah, man, I want to support you. Let me help you. I would love to help you find the space. Right. But, he wants to start off his first office with 3,000 square feet. Because we're going to need it. Well, because in a year, I'm probably going to have 18 people working in here. It's like, whoa, you got to pump the brakes, brother.
Sure.
Like, you need to be realistic about what you are really going to do because all I can tell you right now is rent starts on day one.
Right.
Like that overhead starts on day one.
Exactly.
If you fail because your overhead is too high and you never had the opportunity to grow into it, who knows? It might have had nothing to do with your business practice.
Right.
You set yourself up for failure. So it is certainly about finding that balance because moving is difficult and what you're committed. So you don't want to be too cheap and box yourself into something that doesn't really fit you.
Sure.
You can't move every year.
Right.
And you don't want to be too ambitious. You need to put that in reason. And trying to find that happy medium is again something that I'm constantly working with customers to help them figure out what that realistically what that is.
Sure. Makes sense. Definitely. All right. So that's our top 3. How about moving on to number 4?
Oh, number 4 is a little bit more tricky, and this doesn't come up all the time. Zoning and use.
I kind of have a little bit of this on my hands right now.
Do you?
With the zoning and
Right. That's why I phrased it this way, getting your round peg to fit in that square hole.
Sure.
If the round peg is small enough, it'll fit in the square hole.
Right.
But not if it's too big.
Right.
So zoning and use, this gets complicated. It doesn't apply so much to leasing, really, but definitely development.
Sure.
And building. I'm in the middle of a transaction down in Belleville that has been going for 2 years, thanks to COVID. 2 years, but we're taking what was zoned as industrial, and we're building a retirement village on it.
Oh, okay.
So it involves a rezoning. And oftentimes, people are apprehensive to go down that road because the property is not currently zoned correctly, right?
Sure.
So they know it's going to take meetings and planning,
right?
Of course, and that sounds like a lot of work. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And when you're talking about like what something is zoned now is just what somebody thought it'd be best used as
at the time,
whenever they zoned it.
Sure, right.
That zoning might be 5 years old. It might be 20 years old.
Sure.
It depends on what you're talking about. And especially now more evident than ever is we've entered a new reality of what makes sense, right? Yeah. Like we're seeing retail malls converted to apartment complexes, right? Like we're seeing the board redrawn around us.
Right.
So what I wanted to stress was don't be afraid of zoning.
Okay.
Right? Like in most municipalities,
sure,
most people that work at these municipalities really want to see prosperity.
Sure.
Most of them, right? Nobody's really anti-prosperity.
Right.
So it's just about having that. Here I get back to eat the frog, right?
Yeah.
A planning review sounds terrible, but sitting down, communicating your message, don't be afraid to go. If it's the right piece of property,
sure,
the location's right, the size is right, the ingress, egress all looks great. You can envision your use on that property.
Right.
Have that difficult discussion because it's probably not going to be as difficult as you think it is.
Sure.
These municipalities want to see success. They want to see property revitalized. They want to see it used, and they want to see people flourish. So we are going through this now, and And because of COVID and the lack of being able to get in front of planning commissions and stuff, this process has taken a long time. So it's a terrible example. It's probably it's like the last 2 years has been as bad as it could possibly be. But we're taking an industrial site, rezoning it, and we are doing residential, high density residential for a retirement village, right down in Belleville. Nice. It's a great property. So we took 18 acres and we're reusing it in that way. So don't let when you're doing your property search, don't. Like maybe when you're doing, a lot of these are online, right? Don't set that filter criteria as one of your zoning uses. Right. Find the right property first, and let's see if we can make it work.
Awesome. All right, and then 5, we've got landlord-tenant and tenant relationship.
Yes.
So I'm curious about this one. We have multiple tenants in our building. And what's funny is I enjoy seeing all these folks. When I walk in, I say good morning to them and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I enjoy that. So I'm curious what you've got to say here on this part.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right? So many people look at the landlord as the bad guy, for lack of a better word, that they look at the lease as this horribly legal document that's really long and really painful. And the lease, in all fairness, is about what happens when everything goes wrong.
Sure.
Right? It's not what we live by day to day. So the lease needs to be there to protect both parties. The lease is protecting the landlord, it's protecting the tenant. It is what happens if something goes wrong. This is what we fall back to. That way there is no he said, she said, that we know we have a way forward thanks to this lease. So it's important. Look at the lease as your protection blanket. That's your security blanket.
Sure.
Your relationship with your landlord should be a friendly one.
Yeah.
Really, it's a partnership between a tenant and a landlord, right? Like the landlord wants to collect their rent and the tenant wants to flourish in their space.
Exactly.
So it's about a healthy partnership. And too often I see people enter that relationship very apprehensively because they just don't like the idea of this lease. And I've seen leases that are 34 pages long and that put somebody off. And they read through all this and what if this and what if that, and they leave it feeling like, oh my gosh, this person they're terrible. They're going to come after me and chase me down.
Right.
And that is absolutely not the recipe for success.
Right.
I really encourage actively involved landlords such as yourself. I always make sure my tenants meet with my landlords, shake hands, meet eye to eye. We have to have this lease. It protects the both of us. But this lease does not define our relationship.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than a good, positive relationship between the landlord and his tenants. And adding to that, the other tenants in the space.
Sure.
Right. I have seen disasters occur that ended up hurting both parties. A client of mine who had primarily office space at one point allowed a CrossFit style gym because he had vacancy and they wanted to fill it and they wanted to get the rent, right? So short-term gain, my bills are getting paid. But his other tenants in the space were professional office users.
Became upset with that.
Constant headbanging over the noise, the distraction, the flood of cars, the people outside in shorts and tank tops running around the parking lot, things like that. It was not the right use.
The whole dynamic changes.
The whole dynamic changes. Yeah. So it's important. And even though the gym got the space they wanted, ultimately they didn't have the relationship with any of their peers that would have helped them be more successful.
Sure.
So it is about those relationships. You can't put enough value on them, and having a good partner. It is a partnership. Yeah. The prosperity of the development is based on the strength of the tenants in it, and those tenants all affect each other.
Nice.
So get involved, meet your landlord, and all I can say is don't let that lease put a bad taste in your mouth about the type of experience. Everybody needs to have it, and a lot of the boilerplate language in leases is driven by insurance requirements.
Absolutely.
And, because I can tell you from experience, most of the damage done to a property is not because the tenant intentionally did something. Not because they misused the space. It's not because somebody dumped hazardous materials inside an office building.
Sure.
It's mostly about neglect.
Right.
And it goes on and nobody's paying attention, and what would have been $100 fix is now $1,000 fix because we didn't take care of it when it was $100 fix.
Exactly.
So it's really a partnership. And it's good for the tenants to know their landlord, to have their information, and for everybody to be involved, with each other and active in that partnership.
Sure. Awesome. Well, there's our top 5 keys to finding your next commercial space. Trevor, thank you for being with us. And, I got to throw this out there because I know your wife also, I know you don't like the word entrepreneur, but I don't know how else to say it. So your wife's also an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And owns a wedding dress?
Yes. We additionally, we own the dress shop. It's in Howell, Latson Road in Grand River as well, very close to the brewery.
All for weddings?
We do all weddings. Yeah, we just do bridal, basically the brides.
I got you.
When we started off, we also did mother the brides and we did bridesmaids as well. We have narrowed our scope and kind of focused on the brides. And our store is really dedicated to the brides, and we've grown it. We've had it for, I think, 8 years now.
Nice.
So my wife runs that operation. Yeah, so we have that as well, and I'm really proud of her.
That's cool.
My wife's much more corporate minded than I am.
Oh, okay.
And she had I went to Lansing Community College. She went to Central Michigan. She has her master's. I kind of got my associates. She knows every rule of HR, and I'm like, whatever, fill out this W-2, So she has taken that business and really from day one run it with a very big picture, nice. Replicatable, almost if you were trying to build a franchise from the day one.
Okay.
Has a professional sales trainer come in and work with our staff, all of it. And so she's run it different than I really ever run my stuff. I'm much more, by the seat of my pants type of guy. And she's not. And to watch the fruits of that labor are really starting to come home to roost the last couple of years, to watch those fruits blossom in there now. And now we have I feel like we have a replicatable model. Maybe we could do another location or something.
Sure.
It's been a fantastic ride to watch her go and do that and really get her head around something that she wasn't in before. She was in the wedding business.
Okay.
She used to work at Crystal Gardens in Livingston County, and was really running the HR and doing high level corporate sales and things. And then we had the opportunity to buy this wedding dress shop, and said, but it's only going to make sense if Jessica takes the helm.
Right.
So she had to get her head around, and she had some experience at DSW. She used to manage a DSW store when out of college. So she had experience in retail, but certainly selling wedding dresses was nothing she had done.
A little different, yeah.
Right, but from her taking sort of those corporate experiences and implementing them into a small, it's a 5,000 square foot retail store. Now we're at a point where we have sort of this replicatable process, and it's been a pretty wild ride to watch her really grow that business. It's awesome. Super proud of her.
And you all have a young family?
We do. We have 2 boys, 3 and 6.
So nobody's sleeping.
Nobody's
between
sleeping.
All the businesses, the kids.
And I have the most amped up boys I've ever. We started a little bit later in life. We got together later in life. So I'm 42 with a 3-year-old.
Sure. Okay.
Which is not how I would have ideally planned it.
But you know what? You really don't know any different.
Yeah.
It'd be different if you had like a college, like I've got a daughter in college. If I had a daughter in college and then I had a 3-year-old, I would know. But
right.
You don't know that other side.
Right. I do have a buddy in that situation right now. He's a 3-year-old and one going off to college.
Oh, gosh.
That wasn't planned, of course. But they're a handful. And we have energized little boys who are oftentimes running around the brewery, if anybody's up there.
Okay. Well, they probably help you sell more beer, maybe. I don't know.
They typically just run around the back and make mountains out of the grain bales. But
Well, I love that. Well, thank you, Trevor, for joining us. And so if someone wanted to reach out and get a hold of you, what's the best phone number to reach you at?
Yes, definitely. 517-548-9700. That's going to come straight to my desk. We are Lorex Real Estate. We're right in downtown Brighton on 2nd Street, 2nd Street office building. So out my window, I'm looking at the State Bank, kitty corner over to Lynn's Cafe, which is fantastic for breakfast.
Nice.
So please come find us. Again, we specialize in commercial real estate. The firm has been around since 1995. We can say that before my time, but
sure,
we've done Lowe's, we've done Walmart, we've done Staples.
Oh, you've done big
deals.
Stuff.
Yeah, we've done big deals. The man that I work for, who owns the firm, this has been his career, and he has taught me a whole lot. It's a pleasure to work with him. He specializes on the really big deals. My discipline, I've been a little bit more laser focused for 10,000 square feet or less, office and retail. Leasing is sort of where I'm honed in. But yes, please come see us. We'd love to help you out.
Awesome.
Understand your business better, understand your needs better, and help you find the right thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. All right. So if anyone would like to reach out to Trevor Brooks, all his contact information will be at the end of the podcast. PCIA is PCIAonline.com, and our phone number is 800-969-4041. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.